Hey guys! So today you and I are going to talk about learning new languages. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, hi Frederik, is it really necessary to learn a new programming language every year to maintain a job in software engineering? No, it is not. The reason being because even though there's a lot of languages on the market, your company is not going to be switching, most likely at the very least, to a new language every year. Because why would they? Now, usually the thing that gets lost in translation when we talk about software being developed in one language or another with one tech stack versus another and so forth is the fundamental question. All right, so why are you doing all of this? Like why would you use this language versus another and so forth and so forth? Because once you've made the decision, what would be the benefit in switching? Well, the benefit in switching, that comes down to a number of factors. Everything from, you just name it, how popular it is in the marketplace or how cool it is, to how fast it is, do you have the right tools for like your specific setup, and so forth and so forth. So it always becomes a cost value analysis that you're going to do whenever you switch from any tool. It doesn't have to be a whole language. It can be library A, library B, like you always look at it, right? And so as you can imagine, if you really think about it, if you've already found the perfect quote-unquote now programming language for your specific company, your specific product or something like that, why would you switch? Why would you switch more than once? Twice? Like what would possibly be the benefit to it, unless, as I said, there's something concrete that you have realized that switching will give you, something that's going to benefit you. To give you a silly example, let's say C# and Java. Now, both of these two languages are under active development, but if you have one or the other, why would you go over to the other? There would be, apart from, like as I said, maybe you made a mistake or maybe something happened that made it more realistic for you, or some type of values can be given, right? But once you've done that switch, then my first question would be, all right, so why would you switch again then? So if you already switched once, what would be the next reason for you to switch? So if you really just think about it, like, guys, how many times would you switch a programming language, and why would you believe that you have to learn each, like every year? Now, the reason why people tell you that it's good for you to renew yourself and keep track of new languages and so forth, that has nothing to do with what the realities are of your job, depending on where you work. I'll touch on why it can be important. But for the average software developer, when you work in a company, they're gonna use that stack. It's absolutely true that some tools might be switched or stuff like that, and sometimes you have language migrations because it makes a lot of sense. But as you can imagine, that's a pretty, depending on the size of the project, a hefty investment for the average company. So it's not something that happens all that often. To give you some notion of it, guys, there are still organizations who are running COBOL and similar such as languages that for sure could have been migrated to something more modern, more performable, like all of these sort of things. But from their perspective, the investment, because remember, the reason why you're building software on the average is to make money for some company or to streamline something or so forth and so forth. So unless they feel that the new language, the new stack that they're going for has some type of tangible value, there's no motivation to switch. And this is the thing that I always tell people when people say, oh, this language is going to take over or that language is going to take over. And I go, no, it's not. Because the only thing on average now that will make organizations and these sort of larger companies, and not just necessarily larger companies, but as you can imagine, if you've already settled on a language and you have spent millions and millions and millions in salaries and so forth, and you have like I don't know how much code, you're going to migrate that, and then you really have to be sure that that new thing that you're going to get is going to be something really important. My favorite example of like that sort of disruption happening is, for example, if we have two situations that I argue for. One situation where it actually did make the difference is to use containers as an example. Containers came in, like it became this new trend thing, and it became a really, really big thing. Now we're like, and then you have people who say WebAssembly. WebAssembly is going to be exactly as big, it's going to be the new way we do web. No, it's not, most likely. And that is exactly the thing I'm talking about, like, because the containers gave you something that without it you would lose out, or that's the basic idea at the very least. WebAssembly gives you something else, and so forth and so forth. But currently, due to the fact that there are no like customers expecting it and so forth, so the incentive to make the switch is pretty low. Even though WebAssembly is a pretty cool technology and so forth, maybe it's going to take over at some point, but not right now. Same thing with your favorite framework, your favorite library, your favorite languages, all that stuff. None of that matters, because for us software developers, we have to remember what's cool for you and me, and on the message boards and what we are starring on GitHub and so forth. That doesn't matter at all for the average company. Definitely not for the customers. Customers couldn't give a shit what you're using in your stack. We could all be sitting in assembly for they care. As long as the system provides the value that they're looking for and so forth, they don't care what you're using. And that is the thing that I want you to understand. As a professional software developer, on average, you will be on a project that uses the same language forever. Practically, or well, not forever, but I hope for the time that you're going to be there, you're not going to be switching languages. The thing that means something for you, though, is not from the company's perspective or from the project's perspective, but for your own career. Now, if you are, let's say, really like the most standard of standards is you're a Java developer or a C# developer, odds are that you will never have to learn another language, because the investment in these languages is so enormous that why would you, unless which is the thing that I think benefits you. If you really don't want to switch, you can pick some languages that are so standard that you're never going to have an issue with it. If you pick languages that are maybe more obscure, more niched or so forth, maybe not as adopted, you might find that depending on work situations, because again, adoption is the main thing here, guys, at least from a job perspective. If you're using languages that may not be adopted so much in one area and a lot in another area, you might find that you need to switch languages, and then because the companies in that specific region or that company is using something different from what you have, and that is the red thread through all of this. From a project perspective, it's not necessary for you to upgrade yourself with new languages every single year. Definitely not like every year, for sure. The IT industry does not move that fast. But for your own personal career and your own growth and so forth, it is good for you to have exposure to more than one work environment. The reason being because learning one language is going to that is in of itself an amazing achievement. So if you do that, hats off to you guys. If you made it all the way into becoming like a junior or like a mid-level or so forth and so forth, don't feel stressed out about this, guys. I'm talking like you're like really trying to become, if you have the passion and the interest and so forth, it might be worth looking into more stuff, but like just settle on something first before you start getting nervous that, if I don't start immediately learning new languages and so forth, I'm not going to be able to make it. You're definitely going to be able to make it as like a solo, like one language software developer. But with that said, for people who are maybe interested in broadening their profile and so forth, it's still worth it, because whenever you want to transition, and unless you're on one of those really, really big languages, you might find that you need to transition. And even if you are on one of those big languages, maybe you want to work in a specific company where they're using something else. It's good as exposure, one part, because if you have a little bit of width to yourself, you're going to expand your way of thinking. That's the thing I'm basically trying to tell you. That's also something that I've always found, that my best example is, if you want, me personally, I argue that if you want to have the best Node.js developers, you want really nerdy C# or Java developers who made the transition to TypeScript. The reason being because currently I argue that the biggest issue with the JavaScript community is that there's very little emphasis on theoretical construct polymorphism. So it doesn't have to be object-oriented, but like the more computer sciencey topics. But in Java and C#, that's your bread and butter. That's what you're going to learn. You're going to learn that immediately, right? And so if you can make that transition into another language, I'm not saying that you should write JavaScript or TypeScript code the same way as you do Java and C#, but a lot of that understanding will transition really, really well. And that goes for quite a lot of languages, guys. I can tell you that at some point, the thing that is going to distinguish you between, like if we're talking just seniors in general, some seniors, they will, as I said, be a one language senior, and that's going to be fine for their career purposes. But some people go the extra mile and like learn more stuff and so forth and so forth. And usually what happens is that they will further deepen their understanding of their tools. In other words, like they're going to outgrow the people who are only on one language. Because as I said, like in the beginning, one language is more than enough for you to evolve yourself all the way up to a certain point. But to get further than that, either you have to go super deep on the language, which most people don't, or you have to diversify a little bit. So what I want you to take away from this is that no, you do not have to learn any programming language every single year. I promise you, you're never ever, if you're one of those people who just want to go and get a job and sit on the same company or so forth and so forth for years, and assuming now that you can keep that job, you're probably never going to touch another programming language for the rest of your career. Because the switching between languages and so forth in the industry, it does not happen that often. It's really, especially for the larger organizations, it's not that common that people just switch the whole language. Libraries, more common, some tools and stuff like that, absolutely. But the core languages usually stay the same. And for those of you who may be on a more niche stack or something with a language that is not as widely adopted globally, that might be a case that it might be the case that you get forced into it because you need to switch jobs or something like that, and then there's a new language, right? And then what I would suggest to you is to start by focusing on getting one stack right. Don't like stress yourself out over learning a lot of languages and stuff like that. Like, guys, I've worked with a lot of languages now, both professionally and as a hobby and so forth, and that is because I find it interesting and so forth and so forth, and I have had a little bit of a specific type of goal when I did my career development and stuff like that. But it's not something that I focused on when I was a junior, because it doesn't matter how many languages you try to force yourself to learn if you can't produce in the one that the product is using, because that's the thing you should focus on. You need to learn how to produce well with one setup before you can learn all the other stuff and have any value from it. But once you are pretty good at one setup and you know you can do the grind and all that stuff, then it's a healthy thing for you to try some stuff out, because it's going to further your understanding of the software that you are writing and make you a more well-rounded software developer. Have a great day.